All right, good morning, committee. We're going to go ahead and get started because we did have to pass over one of the budgets yesterday since we did not get to it. First item on the agenda is, are there any bill introductions this morning? All right, seeing none, I will now turn it over to, I assume, Representative Ballard, who is going to be giving us the Budget Committee report on the Department of Children and Families. Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. We had to get a new copy, so now I'm going to have to try to put it together here. Okay. For 2023, the agency submits an FY 2023 revised estimate of $966.3 million, including $388.9 million SGF, which is a decrease of $35.6 million, or 3.6% below the FY 2023 approved budget. The decrease is all contained in federal or special revenue funds. The decrease is attributable to the depletion of available COVID-19 pandemic funding for child care stimulation grants, which comes to $104 million, and child care assistance grants at $9.3 million. The decreases were partially offset by increases for new federal programs enhancing child care quality, predominantly for child care bonuses and career pathways at $44 million. New utility assistance funding at $7.2 million, and funding allocated for information technology upgrades was at $9.4. The agency submits a revised estimate of 2,682 FTE positions in FY 2023, which is an increase of 24 FTE positions above the approved number. The positions are primarily for new programs in utility assistance and prevention and protection services. The governor's recommendation, the governor recommends expenditures of $974 million, including $394 million SGF in FY 2023. The recommendation is an all-funds increase of $8.3 million, including an SGF increase of $5.4 million above the FY 2023 revised estimate. The increase is attributable to revised estimates for human services caseloads, expenditures for temporary assistance for needy families, which we call, TANF. Caseloads are anticipated to decline by $750,000, all from federal funds. Expenditures for foster care are projected to increase by $9 million. Including $5.4 million SGF in 2023. While the projected number of children in foster care is lower than the spring 2022 consensus caseloads, there is an increase in the projected average costs per child. As far as our House budget is concerned, the Budget Committee concurs with the governor's recommendation for FY 2023.
All right, committee, are there any questions for Representative Ballard in regards to fiscal year 2023? Seeing none, Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For 2024, the agency requests $855 million, less than what we were doing for 2023, including $412 million SGF for 2024, which is an all-funds decrease of $111 million, including SGF increase of $23 million at 6%. The request includes 14 enhancement requests totaling $55.8 million, including $37 million in SGF. Major enhancements include a replacement of the Child Care Welfare Information System at $25 million, allowing youth to retain their Social Security Administration supplemental security income, benefits, services position salaries at $5.8. The enhancements are partially offset by reductions in federal funding for various COVID pandemic programs, resulting in reductions in staffing levels and child care support grants. The agency requests 2,659 FTE positions for FY 2024, which is a decrease of 23 FTE positions below the 2023 revised estimate. The enhancement requests add 17 FTA positions related to the human services information, and there's 8 positions there for the 2022 Senate Bill H 2448 employment services. There were 8, and changing the allocation for the SSA, SSI, which was your Social Security, basically benefits. The increases are offset by reductions in administration positions and from the reserve pool and due to the end of COVID pandemic funding for some programs. The governor recommends expenditures of $807 million, including $389 million SGF for FY 2024. The recommendation is an all funds decrease of $38 million, including SGF decrease of 22.8. below the 24 agency requests. The decrease is attributable to the governor not recommending enhancements for the Child Care Welfare Information System, expenditures associated with this substitute HB 2448, human services position salary increases, the Human Services Executive Branch Information Technology Program, Family Resource Centers, legal services, administrative operating expenses, foster care, and again with the Social Security funds, and the fostering connection maintenance of effort. The governor recommends partial funding for the independent living subsidy for youth enhancement request and the We Can Drive enhancement request, which is reflected as a decrease from the agency request. In addition to no or partial funding for agency enhancement requests, the overall decrease is also attributable to the deletion of 300 SGF for the Hope Ranch, which you'll find we did add, and $900,000 in federal funding to implement the TANF consensus caseloads estimate. The decreases are partially offset by the addition of $8 million, including $7.4 million SGF for the foster care consensus caseloads estimate. The foster care estimate is an all funds decrease of $1 million, including SGF increase of $2 million from the FY23 revised estimate, while the total number of children in foster care continues to decrease. The daily rate paid to child placing agencies is estimated to increase. Those rate increases are partially offset due to one-time expenditures, and we've covered that with foster care workforce and the CALM parent development bonuses. Those are programs. These expenditures were not included in the fall 2022 consensus caseloads estimate. The estimate does include $3.9 million, including 3.6 SGF for a continuation of the Failure to Place program, which was first initiated in 2023. The governor recommends the agency request enhancements to foster care replacement rates. Rates increase for vocational rehab, centers for independent living. The recommendation also includes $3.7 million, including $1.5 million to maximize the match for the Federal Child Care and Development Fund. The purpose of this fund is to provide access to child care so parents can work and or attend school or other training. House budget recommendations. We concur with the governor's recommendation with the following adjustments. Number 1, add $750,000, including $624,975 SGF to fund the CAN Coach supervisor coaching program in the Children's Alliance of Kansas. And I will be happy to explain more detail if you have questions about what each of these programs that I'm talking about to give you more background. Number 2, add $6 million, including $5.1 million SGF for the foster care therapeutic program for child placing agencies in the Children's Alliance of Kansas for 24. Add $350,000 SGF to expand Safe Families for Kansas for 4 additional counties for FY 2024. Add an additional $216,783 to increase reimbursable rates to the Centers for Independent Living by 20% for 2024. 5, add $300 SGF for the Hope Ranch. for women and add language. And this program is basically working with women in trafficking. To report to the legislature on or before January 9, 24, with performance measures to evaluate the program's effectiveness. 6, add 780,000 SGF for Boys and Girls Clubs for out-of-school time support for FY 2024. And 7, to add 772,000, including 486 SGF to the Kansas Children's League to expand Healthy Families America into 4 additional counties by FY 2024. I am happy to stand for questions, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Representative Ballard. You said that you could possibly elaborate on item number 1. Could you please do so?
Yes. Number 1, I got to go back to where we're looking at. Number 1, the $750 to fund the CAN Coach program for the Alliance. Part of CAN Coach is a supervisor coaching program. The research has clearly pointed out that the most important factor in the child welfare worker retention is the quality of the supervision of the case managers. Kansas has been working through a federally funded program called CAN Coach to develop and implement a child welfare supervision coaching model to improve the retention and the quality of the child welfare workforce. This federal program is nearing the end of its funding cycle, but it was recommended that we continue with this funding because it has helped in areas of making sure that all areas in a retention, whether you're in a home, and the idea is also to keep you in the home, but also to make sure that you almost have everything provided for you, but you need the case manager supervising, working on it to make sure that everything is happening at that time. And it seems that that program seems to be working for, I guess, the big portion would be child placing agencies and thinking in terms of stabilizing the workforce, making sure that you have the people that you need. And everything centers basically around the supervision of the case managers, making sure that it doesn't get lost through the cracks, that the child is receiving the services that they need.
So we've been funding this in the past. How many years have we been funding this? Because I'm not showing it being any type of enhancement. So is that embedded in the agency's budget? And I don't see where the governor did not recommend it.
No, but initially it's a federal program. And we weren't, actually until this came to us recently, we weren't really aware of it because it didn't show up in any other stuff that we have. But I think Brenda can explain part of it because she knows this.
Representative Landwehr.
You just call me Brenda.
Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Brenda Landwehr.
I believe it was probably, if I'm not mistaken, maybe in KU's, because KU used to run this, and now it's going to be the Children's Alliance that will run it. So it has been an existing ongoing program.
All right, thank you. On items number 3 and 7, there is that it will go to 4 additional counties. So my first question is, how many counties are we currently having these programs in? And then my second question is, what are these 4 additional counties, and are they same for both items?
Part of it is, okay, we can look at for 3. Part of the expansion, McPherson area is currently holding Manhattan, Fort Riley communities in order to expand its impact in McPherson, Manhattan, Salina, and Fort Riley areas. Kansas is seeking, well, that's why they needed the additional money. This will support Safe Families to establish 2 staff in McPherson and 3 staff in Manhattan and Fort Riley areas. let's see what else I could tell you about it. Kansas has served 127 children within 65 families and 68 volunteers. This means that 127 children who did not enter foster care, 65 families who did not experience the trauma of family separation, and as of today, Safe Families is fully staffed in all three regions, Kansas City, Wichita, and Southeast Kansas, while actively working to add one social media marketing staff person on a part-time basis.
So nothing west of Salina.
They haven't seen that.
Item number 4. There's an addition of about $217,000, but then on item number 32, under the governor's recommendation, she has the partial funding, in which she recommended $417,000 to make the independent living assistance subsidy 100%. Why is there an addition of $217,000 when the governor is making it 100%?
Okay. Because we're talking basically about centers for independent living, and there's 10 different centers throughout the state. I can give you the names of those if you want them. And they get funded at various levels, depending on what their formula might be for this. But the big deal with this is it keeps them in their homes. And that's what we intended in terms of being able to service them in the communities, but it's keeping them in their homes. They will work to transition people out of rehab and nursing facilities so they can stay at home. But part of it is the increase would allow the center with the smallest allocation to receive approximately $20,000 instead of $10,000. If we stayed at the increase of $216,783, it would be $10,000. Increasing it to 20% would allow them to have $20,000, a more realistic representation of the increase and the demand of the costs as they went up. Centers for Independent Living are required to serve anyone with a disability, whether or not they are on a waiver or Medicaid. The center's entire reason for being is to provide service required to help a person with a disability stay independent in their home. And each center is slightly different set of services based on the communities they serve. So the idea was if we doubled it, we're able to serve more people, but also the smaller center would have more money in order to work because they don't get the same amount of money, but they all, there's 10 centers would all be sharing the $216,000, and by doubling it, those 10 centers would have more money for outreach to be able to serve more people and keep them in their homes.
All right, thank you. And the last item that I have is...
Wait a minute, hold on just a minute. He was
Yes.
Yeah, but we wanted to make sure that the governor recommended that one, but we did an additional in order to help expand this program and give centers more money in order to work with more people.
All right. My final question is in regards to the Hope Ranch program for women. The governor had deleted that funding, and she had indicated that she wanted that to go through a state bid process to determine the appropriate level of funding for the services. And then in your notation from the Budget Committee is directing them to have a report to the Legislature before January 9th, 2024 with performance measures to evaluate the program's effectiveness. We've been funding this for 2 years, fiscal years, correct?
Yeah, into this year now, yes.
Have we not evaluated their performance measures as of yet? They should have some of those by now.
They've sent a report into us. That's a really touchy area. As you noticed, the governor did not fund it, but when they came before us and presented, we asked questions about the report. There were people on our committee felt that we needed a more detailed report in terms of their services. But then when we asked the secretary about what they were doing. She indicated that she did not have any great concerns about not renewing them, that they were filling a void and that they were doing it. So based on that, that's how that money got back in to stay where it was. But this time more specific about the kind of report that we want to receive from them.
So when this report comes back next year in 2024, is there going to be any adhering to the what the governor had mentioned, and that they go through the state bid process for fiscal year 2025?
Now, we hadn't discussed that, but I think from the gut level, well, from what we were saying, is that part of this was to help them stay on their feet and do what they were supposed to do. And this additional funding would help them do that. But we may have to go to a different model in terms of it. But they were right in the middle of receiving their money. And it's one of the few programs we have that's really dealing with the trafficking that seems to be effective. But eventually, that funding will have to change. It can't just continue the way it is.
Okay, thank you. Representative Landwehr.
Okay, if I understand, Mr. Chairman, what staff is talking about, I don't think they'd have to go through that bid process. It'll still be a direct appropriation. And as far as my other questions, you actually asked them, so I'm good.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So probably the best words that I've heard in this entire budget are the number of foster kids decreasing.
Yes.
I mean, that's something that we all should celebrate. That is wonderful news. Have we narrowed down any specific things that we are doing that are helping with that? Is it a congregation of different things? Is there something we're doing that's working? Because, well, we know the state doesn't make the greatest parents. So,
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I would say there's several things that we're doing. Part of it was that CAN coaching, that you have, the best way I can explain it, the way it was explained to us, you have the coaches there, and part of that is looking at the specific needs of those children, the therapeutic needs of what they want. Are we meeting all of those needs? And at the same time, do we know when they move to another level? In other words, it's almost like the PACE, but in the other way, it's a one-stop deal that you're getting everything you need. And they're finding out that it's therapeutic. For those that are younger, especially under 3 years old, part of that is they can't tell you what's really going on, but you are able to meet those needs through the other part of, if I look at the program that we're looking at, is it was the therapeutic, and the other issue that we're looking at was what's the one on sex? I'm drawing a complete blank, was Safe Families. And part of the Safe Families, it's not a foster or an adoptive service program, but parents maintain parental rights and full custody of their children. And as a result of doing that, in many cases, we serve priors. We are keeping them in their homes and working with the parents so that they don't have to go into foster care. And that was the biggest issue of looking at what is a safe family. And then we have the Family First prevention program that we have. But the idea is if you want to serve them where they are, then try not to get them into foster care. And so as a result, that's where the coaching comes in, that's where the therapeutic comes in, so that if we can keep them in the home, and we're working not only with the child with the disabilities, but with parents being able to work with the situation. Or in this case, it could be the parent that's having the drug problem or the alcohol problem or the depression problem or not being able to give the attention it needs. So it becomes more inclusive. It's not just working with one, it's working with all of them. That's one of the reasons. So we said, were they in the office? They had no place to stay. But the whole idea is, if we don't give them in that situation, keep them at home and try to work. And what they know, it is working.
Good.
So that's part of what it is. So we will spend this money to do this, but they're not going into the system. And we may be saving the families, and we're certainly saving the children.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. I think that it is worthy of mention and celebration. Thank you.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a few questions, so if you want to interrupt me at any point, you won't hurt
I may.
You won't hurt the one feeling that I have left, so that's fine.
One feeling.
All right. First off, I wanted to ask regarding the child care welfare information system replacement project. Seems like we had started that a couple years ago. Is that the deletion of funding? Is that because that project is coming in upon completion, or we just decided to scrap the whole idea?
Representative Ballard.
Where are you specifically referring to that one?
Under the governor's rec, first paragraph. The decrease is attributable to the governor not recommending enhancements for the child care welfare information system replacement.
Representative Ballard.
We did not discuss this. Was there anything else on it?
They funded the portion of it in FY23. The project is still ongoing.
Okay. They funded this program in '23, and the project is still ongoing.
The project is ongoing. We just decided not to fund it.
Representative Ballard.
I would say if the governor didn't, the governor decided not to fund it.
Representative Sutton.
All right. Interesting. I'll put a pin in that one. As far as Senate sub for HB 2448, there were some expenditures associated that were not recommended. If I recall correctly, I'm not even sure how that touches this budget, but wasn't that the one that said something about able-bodied workers have to take job training or something along those lines? And we did it last year. What expenditures were supposed to be associated with that legislation that weren't recommended?
Representative Ballard.
I don't know. I think we had, was it career, oh boy, was it career navigators? Yeah, okay, it was career navigators, but that's the only problem the only one that I know would be associated with that.
Okay, they just recommended not funding that one as well? I agree with it. I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding what happened.
Representative Ballard.
I have to be very honest, but, we didn't ask the governor, why did you not fund it?
Right.
Or anything else. A lot of our information comes from people come in and say, there's a void in this program, we need to have this back, or why it wasn't, or anything like that. But I did wonder, but when the secretary came in to speak to us, it's not an area we addressed, and there was no one that came before us in the testimonies, and we had, pretty close to 50 that talked about the void and why it wasn't. But I don't want to make an assumption why she didn't do it.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. One other one, I heard this phrase twice, once in 23 and once in 24. And I just kind of want to get an idea of scale. When it says, while the total number of children in foster care continues to decrease, the daily rate paid to child placing agencies is estimated to increase. And I understand the sentence, obviously, but I don't know the scale. How much is the child? How many fewer children are we dealing with on an annualized basis? Since it was in the 23 budget, it's in the 24 budget. This is probably a trend. How big of a trend is it?
Representative Ballard.
We don't have a number per se, but part of the cost that's going up is because we're having to also pay agencies to place foster children.
Sure, and I get that, and I appreciate it. Thanks for that.
But you want to know, like, how big is it?
Yeah, right, and how long is this going to go? Are we going to continue to dwindle? And obviously this is absurd, but just to illustrate my point, are we going to dwindle to the agency still being funded at exactly the same level with one child in DCF? Obviously not, but what are the numbers that we're talking about? That's the part that I'm not following.
Representative Ballard.
The number of children entering care with high behavioral needs increase every year. The other thing is, the older the child is, the harder it is to place. Sure. So you're paying, that's the increase is coming, you're paying more people to place that older child and meet their particular needs. Excellent. Also, the cost and all of that has gone up. So that's part of it. But by doing things like hand coach, therapeutic, that's decreasing that number. Now, how much is decreasing the number, I don't know, but we know it's working. If over time we continue to decrease those numbers, then I think you will see substantial numbers. But what has been indicated here, FY23, he indicates 6,400, and in 24, it's projected to be 62.
Okay, so not massive reduction.
I don't think it's massive reduction,
okay.
But the idea is, as we go along, if we continue with some of the programs that we know that's working, and we are keeping them in the homes, and they're not doing that, that number will come down substantially. But because everything has gone up from clothes to placing to doing this, you can't see the big difference in a monetary.
Right.
But hopefully you'll be able to see it in the numbers if it's working. And as long as we're doing that, then you could say we're on a path to try to decrease this. But also, we can't forget that that older child that's not being placed has to have a special place there as well. The other thing that's helping us is the 18 to 20-year-olds. Okay, when they age out of foster care, they're not forgotten. They still can get, subsidy for their living accommodations. They also can receive services and everything else. And hopefully, before they turn 21, they are on a better projection to work, take care of themselves and everything else. So we haven't abandoned them at 18. So that number can still increase, because if we're working with the older, they may not get to that. They may be in better shape before they get old enough to what I'm trying to say is we're increasing that older number so that they're not in need as much, as well as that 3-year-old that can't tell you what's going on in their lives, and yet keep them out of the foster system.
Representative Sutton.
All right, well, thank you. That actually gives me a little bit of hope, seeing that the numbers are going down more for the younger children, which tells me that in the future, we should see fewer older children if they're...
Well, that's what we're hoping.
That's the plan.
But see, I'm telling you this, and we don't know that that's going to happen. But by the programs that we're looking at now, they're on a different trajectory to work in a different way that seems to be producing results. All right.
The only thing I would want to add into that would be, to my way of thinking, that number of how many kids are in the system should be the one glaring number in front of everybody's face every single day. We shouldn't have to work to get that number. That's the number we're trying to decrease. That's what we got to target. That's the one that we got to be focused on all the time.
I would agree.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Landwehr.
Thank you. I think one of the reasons too is that you'll see some of the older age kids in the system is that like fetal alcohol syndrome. You don't see that trigger till about 9 or 10 years of age, and that's a long process to take and work with these kids and get them to where we can stabilize them and help them age out of the system. And I don't recall correctly, and is it 21 or 23 that they actually age out of the system?
21.
21? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to go back to the comprehensive child welfare information system. So you said that we have put money in that in the past.
Which one? I'm sorry.
It's the comprehensive computer system for that they were wanting that the governor didn't do is 25 million, 12 million SGF. You said that we have funded that and in the past.
Dallin.
Representative Ballard.
Let me check with him on that one. When it comes down to the services and who's doing what and what the numbers are in the programs, I can tell you all that. When we get down to the computer system and what we do, I will have to check with that one.
She's more about people than machines.
This is part of the CCYS and the KMIS, their item number.
So you said information technology, am I correct? Okay. Now, we've added 9.4 million in additional special revenue funds and allocations to enhance funding the comprehensive child welfare information system in Kansas. So even though she didn't fund it, well, I don't know where it was, but there is 9.4 million that's in that program in 23.
Representative Hoffman.
Okay, in 23 there was money in there, but so in 24 there's no money for it. So we've been studying it.
No allocated. There was no allocated funds.
So did we get a study out of that $9 million, and then they said we didn't need it?
You know, it's a good
Ballard.
question. That's a good question. That's something I will ask about. We did not ask about that.
Okay.
So I'm not going to make up anything and tell you that, yeah, we did, but we may look at it and see. Now, I don't know if there's carryover.
Okay.
Would there be any carryover from 23, or are they going to another system? And I know we don't ask people out there for help, but I'm just trying to think in terms of, you know, there would have to be something that they're doing. It may not be in this form,
Okay.
but you just can't stop it.
Well, my understanding is that I think they've been studying it, and I think we put money in for them to study it, which tends to be something that we do a lot for information
Like, did you
systems,
notice I
and then
didn't-
we either don't ever do anything or so I would like to, I don't know, maybe if we could just get more information from the agency on that. I'm not going to sit here and make a motion to fund it till I know more what's going on. But I do think that just another reason why we need to have more oversight in these IT projects, because we fund them to study them, $9-10 million, and then we don't do anything. So,
Representative Ballard.
I would agree. And if you notice, I didn't say one word about studying it, did I? No.
well, I think that's what's happened, though.
So I was staying away from studying. But number 4, we will follow up on, and I will see that you get information about where we are on that. And have we studied it enough that we can do something about it, or are we no longer studying it?
Okay, that's perfect. And then number 2 in your budget recommendations, $5 million SGF for the foster care therapeutic program for child placing agencies. Is that a new program, or is that something that we are now paying for out of SGF because it was federal money, or where'd that come from?
Representative Ballard.
You think that's not a new one?
I think it's kind of a new program. Isn't that, don't you have a list?
Yeah, I was looking at, well, I got all my papers messed up. Let me see it. Let me see right here. To answer your question, you said 2?
Yes, number
That-
2.
That is, where is it?
Isn't it?
No, right here, no. Yes, for the therapeutic, it is, it is new. Regarding the $6 million for therapeutic foster care, the vision is that the placing agencies will focus on the priorities of what the students are doing. It's 24/7 in-person, real-time crisis that they're doing, training targeted to educate the workers supporting the therapeutic fosters, but training on demand, centralized, reliable attendant care, in-home therapists to provide evidence-based in-home services. The vision pretty much is that, I see right here, most likely to support development of well-trained therapeutic foster care homes networks, develop a grant to support implementation using I want to do. So part of it is working on different levels, age groups, then move to another age group, and how do they progress along the way. And it's more specialized in what they're doing. And it's hard to really explain it because we were looking at it, but it's a specialized system that you are meeting the child where they are, but progressing them at the same time. And I don't know if that it really explains it, but it's a system that seems to be working. And I need my other sheet so I can tell you more about it.
Go down the line.
Do you have anything you want to add to that one?
Representative Hoffman?
Okay,
Where?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether to.
Well, see, I had them all numbered. Now I can't.
It's just, are we saving any money elsewhere because we're adding this program? Or are we just adding another program in the foster?
Representative Ballard?
Not even sure I could ask that one for you. I don't know I don't know if we're saving money any other place, but
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to cut number 2, and I guess then maybe it might spur some other comments.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. It's been seconded by Representative Helgerson. Discussion on the motion. Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you might remember, and maybe not, right? We all focus on our specific committees and the work that we're doing, where we're at. But Representative Concanon and I met earlier this year in a joint committee meeting trying to find ways to address the number of our youth that are in the criminal justice system being placed into the foster care system. They're called our crossover youth, okay? Currently, there really is no place for them. About 7 years ago, we did away with what are called YRC2 beds. And what we're finding is these youth are then being literally placed with people that have no training, no ability to deal with these issues. It's disrupting entire families, and it's literally driving foster parents away from the system because the judges' hands are tied on what to do with these crossover youth. And so that is exactly what is being addressed with this. I think it warrants an even broader discussion beyond this because it is a significant issue that we've been really trying to be creative on how we address this between her committee and the Juvenile Justice Committee and other stakeholders. So I just wanted to add that context.
Representative Hoffman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate that. I agree that is an issue that has been happening for quite a little while, and if this is going to help that, then I'll withdraw my motion.
and may I give you?
The motion has been withdrawn. Representative Ballard.
I know.
So the motion has been withdrawn. So there's really.
I was looking for my sheet so I could explain it to you, and I finally found it at the. Thank you so much, but because I did a poor job of that, and I wrote it down, and I was going to read that part to you, so I knew I had it there. So, but since you withdrew. But I still want you to know,
Would
though.
you like me to redo the motion?
You know, I say no. I'll be quiet. And I'll say thank you.
Representative Hoffman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then number 6, the Boys and Girls Club. Is this something that we have done in the past? I can't remember. I know we did the Hope Ranch in the past. Have we been doing the Boys and Girls Clubs in the past also?
Representative Ballard.
It's an increased need. And part of that Boys and Girls Club is they have like 18 different programs. They have 70, in other words, remember they're after school. And part of that is childcare. And also they help with the tutoring and everything else they can do, but they want to expand their services more. They're serving over close to 2,000 students, and they needed additional money in order to expand. Not only that, but the cost of everything has gone up for their travel. Remember, they do the buses, they pick the kids up, they take them there, and they need that. They needed more food, they needed more snacks. They also needed to hire more workforce in order to work with the students in the process. So it was enhancing their program. It's allowing them to serve more students after school. This was so it's $780,000. I think when we look at what they really wanted and they needed, but I can give you all the statistics about what they do, but mostly they're allowing parents to still work because childcare is a shortage. They're filling in all of those gaps.
Representative Hoffman.
Okay, is this the Boys and Girls Club of America? Is this a private or a nonprofit, or is this a state program?
Nonprofit, and they
Okay.
raise over 40% of their own funds through
Okay.
donations and raising their money. So they're keeping it going themselves in the process.
Okay. Well, I mean, we've done it. If we've done it in the past, we just continually get into, we're just giving more and more SGF to more and more nonprofits, and I don't know. But I won't say anything else.
But if they're raising,
yeah,
they're
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
fundraising, which they're doing.
Representative Landwehr.
Well, and currently, we do $2.4 million grant through TANF on this particular program. And in a lot of our communities, unless it's changed, I think in Lawrence, they don't have a Y, for
We don't have a
example. And the Boys and Girls Club is huge on their after-school programs. So they fill in a whole lot of gaps, but we've been funding it for a long time.
Representative Hoffman.
So, is there not a way to do that 780,000 in through TANF?
I'm not on
Landwehr?
that. I'm not on that budget.
Okay.
Representative Ballard.
That came up, and part of it is we're at the point that we're kind of watching the TANF funds too, because we have been using TANF for, whenever we need something, let's go to TANF. So we've been trying not to go to TANF in this instance.
Representative Hoffman.
But is there money in TANF to use?
Representative Ballard. Everybody is jumping out.
I know you are.
Well, everybody want to answer.
I know.
There's $55 million that's in TANF.
Okay. I think I'll make a motion that maybe it'll open up for more discussion. I'll make a motion that we switch that 780 to TANF for the Boys and Girls Clubs support.
Is there a second on the motion? Second by Representative Helverson. Discussion on the motion. Representative Kincannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They were declined. They did request TANF funding.
And TANF declined it?
Yes, they were declined. And can I just interject that Representative Ballard missed a zero. They care for 20,000 kids. So I just wanted to add that because it's a lot of money, but those are a lot of kids, and those are kids that are after school, not on the street. Many of them from low-income families or families that have two working parents, and their request was declined from TANF. It was not included, although it was requested for in the DCF budget. It was not included, and I just think it's a great program and money well spent.
Representative Hoffman.
But we can, TANF, even though TANF declined it, we could still add it in. And Dylan, we can, okay, I'm getting that. So I'll maintain my motion.
Representative Landwehr.
Well, and it's been a long time since I've worked with this particular budget, but the TANF comes in kind of in a big block grant, if I get a nod back there from the secretary.
102.
And, for many, many years, we were 100 million plus is kind of where that floated at. And we're now sitting down at, $60 million. And if you don't have that buffer in there, there's going to be programs that we're going to run into problems on later on. So, as probably in the past, I would have said, yeah, put that over into the TANF, but this is probably a path that we're going to have to take on this.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. Just while we're talking about this and the age groups you're dealing with, would you have any thought of maybe including a little Eddie Eagle program in this so those kids would know what's going on?
Oh, Eddie Eagle? No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
That would be directed towards the maker of the
No,
motion.
you didn't.
He wants to have that included.
That's the reason why I don't like doing all of these. I don't think so.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Representative Ballard.
No, may I? Let me just do this. I was looking for my sheet again. All right. So let's look at 12 local organizations. They have over 70 sites in 19 communities, and they're also on military bases in Kansas. When we look at it and we say they raise over 44% of their annual income from private sources and fundraising, and the rest comes from federal, state, local, and tribal. The club served over 18,000 youth in 21. They served over 20 youth in 2022. And please note that the money that's invested, is like they keep going back for it. So when we look at this program, not only are they saving youth, they're getting them off the streets. So now that's helping with the juvenile problem. But in addition to that, there's child care. Mom and dad can go to work. And remember how many moms we have, single moms, heads of households. And they're teaching them skills and everything else. They're doing a whole combination of things for our youth. And who else is going to do it after school? It's difficult to find child care, and they're not just babysitting, they're teaching. And they're developing some character in this. And if we would hear the person tell you about the program, you would say, we almost should be paying them in a way because they're doing a lot that we want to happen with young people.
Representative Hoffman.
Yeah, and I just want to remind you, my motion is to just change the funding, not delete it. So yeah, I'm okay with putting it in. I'm just trying to change the funding source.
Well, we do rely heavily on SGF. But we also have been relying heavy on TANF. We get $102 million a year, and we use it. It seems like everybody says, well, let's go to TANF. Let's go to TANF. Well, we can't totally use all of that up. But that's your motion, and I understand.
Representative Alcala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't take a lot of time. I get a little concerned. I understand we're trying to just utilize dollars someplace else, but I definitely don't want to run into anything where we run into a glitch and maybe it slows down them getting their dollars. I run an after-school program at the Salvation Army 6 days a week, and Boys and Girls Club bus kids over there to participate in my after-school program. I take a lot of the overflow, but they haven't been able to do it a lot lately because the number of kids have grown so much, and staffing, transportation has been hard to get them around. And so it's definitely a good program. I'm an alum of the Boys Club when I was a kid, all the way up until I was probably a late teenager. And I don't need to tell you how good of a program it is, but I just want to make sure we don't run into any bumps in the road to where we make this motion and then all of a sudden it can't happen and we have to come back and look at it again.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And along the same lines of the previous question, can someone explain to me how it can be turned down by TANF and yet we can still use it for TANF? I just don't understand that dichotomy. I saw Dylan shaking yes, but...
Representative Ballard.
You want me to answer?
Dylan explained it to me that the agency, if this is correct, the agency denied the request. It wasn't denied by the federal agency that supplies those funds.
All right. All right.
Well, that was the only thing I was going to comment on. They denied it. We didn't, our committee, but they're the keeper of the funds.
Any further discussion on the amendment or the motion? All right, Representative Helgerson.
In my understanding, this is a new program, and we're now moving in.
No, it's already been explained. It's not a new program. It's an addition to the dollars that already are from the state. That was already
We put in 2.4 million to the boys.
Yes.
But from to the boys clubs.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Hoffman, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're back on the budget. Representative Francis, did you have another question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to confirm from an earlier answer on number 7, what are the 4?
It was already asked.
I know, and I understood the way she answered it. It sounded like I wanted to confirm the 4 counties that it was expanded into on number 7 only.
Well, it was the same counties of Saline, McPherson, we said Gary and
it just seemed,
Manhattan and Fort Riley were the other 2 communities, but
it just seems strange to me that one reflected a certain agency, the other one didn't talk about an agency, and I wanted to confirm that those counties were correct.
Representative Concanon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a question here, but I just want to make a quick comment about Families First. That I didn't get involved in the conversation earlier about why our numbers had dropped, but the last program that was talked about was Families First, and that's the biggie. The reason I wanted to bring it up is because we passed this 4 years ago, I believe, and we have a grant system now with that, and we had some concern about any accountability, and this is the accountability. We were down about 1,000 kids statewide soon after those programs were put into place, because it's federal money that is put in upfront before a child in need of care, a SYNC case, is even filed. So it's programming that helps the child or the families so that they can stay as a unit, because we know that the child will do best if they stay in their own home. My question is on the Can Drive program. We Can Drive is what it's called. We had a pilot program a few years ago, a couple years ago maybe. And I see that they requested full funding, so that program is just in a few counties in northeast Kansas. I can't say the counties because I'm not positive about it. But they're wanting to, it's very, very popular. This is to pay for foster teenagers to get their driver's license. As we know, it's expensive. It's not an expense that foster parents should have to bear. And so we passed, I think it started with a proviso. And they requested funding to expand this statewide. So kids, if you are lucky enough to be a foster child in northeast Kansas, you can get your driver's license. And I see that the governor partially funded that. Is that funding to keep it at the same level, just that pilot program, or is there some expansion? Or what kind of testimony did you hear about that?
Representative Ballard.
We didn't hear any testimony about that. I just looked into that program, knowing that they.
Is your mic on? Is your mic on?
No, thank you. We didn't discuss that program. I just looked in the governor's recommendations, and I don't know why it was a partial, but I also saw in it that they hope to expand.
Well, they requested to go statewide. In the agency's request, it's much bigger. It's to go to expand it statewide. I can't remember the amount that I saw. But then the governor's budget then cut it to $250,000.
So when we look at WeCan, they added $1 million, making sure I have it, adds $1 million SUF for the WeCan Drive program for 23. But then it's, the governor recommended $250,000 for the 24.
That is an expansion.
Yeah, the governor deleted $750,000.
Representative Ballard.
It does not, they plan to expand it, but we don't have any counties that they're expanding to or how much they plan to expand it.
Representative Kincaid.
Well, if I could.
Because it
Okay,
just,
so,
it just says the enhancement request would expand the program statewide, but total participants may be limited.
Yeah,
Representative Kincaid.
Yeah, I found it here. It expands it statewide. That was their request. So.
But would you like more information on it? Let's put it this way. I will go get more information as to where they plan to expand.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that they want to be able to offer it statewide, and you know, I think that it should be statewide, but I'm just trying to understand what the logic was in cutting it, and if that 250, well, I don't know. I'll look into it too.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Howell, no question. Representative Ousley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And at the risk of waking a sleeping dog, I wanted to comment on the Child Care Welfare Information System, otherwise known as CSWIS. For those members on this committee that like reports that and studies, the feasibility study on this was initiated underneath the prior administration and the prior secretary, and the current administration is working on that, and we don't see the funding in this budget because there are about to be RFPs released that will address just 3 and 4. Keep an eye out for it. When they have a figure, I think we'll see that project continue because that's been in need for a long time. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions for Representative Ballard? Seeing none, Representative Ballard. You get to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the Department of Children and Families budget for 2023 and 2024, I move the budget.
As amended.
As amended.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Where's your second, dude?
Seconded by Representative Mason. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. All right. Thank you, Representative Ballard. Now we're going to go on
Chairman.
and work on the budget report from the K through 12 Education Budget Committee. And so I will turn it over to Chairperson Williams. Chairperson Williams.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, committee, if you will look at your Kansas State Department of Education committee report, you will find the expenditures of $6.7 million from the agency estimate and the governor's recommendation of $6.7 million from the governor's recommendation. And you will find the committee's recommendation is to delete that $6.7 million. Of course, not meaning that we're not going to fund education, but we would be moving it to the K-12 as we have done for the past maybe 4 or 5 years. Before I make that motion, I would just note that if you look at 22 and you compare it to 2024 governor's recommendation, the K-12 state general fund increase over 2 years is over $600 million. So that does include the CPIU increase that is going into effect 2024. But that's just that's a significant commitment from the Kansas Legislature for K-12 education. And that's not in this report, but it is in the budget and something that we discuss more thoroughly in our committee. So, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions or go ahead and move my motion.
So that you're covering 23, 24, and 25 out of the budget report?
Yes.
All right, we'll stand for questions. Questions for Chairperson Williams. Representative Ousley.
So it was stated that it's been done like this for the last 4 or 5 years. And I just want to point out to this committee that it's not 6.7 million, it's 6.7 billion for the budget. And 4 or 5 years ago, we were rewriting the education formula when this was pulled from this committee's purview and put just underneath the K-12. We just had a lively discussion on the DCF budget, which is approaching $1 billion. And I think that half the state budget is worthy of this committee's input. And I would object to this. I objected to it yesterday in K-12, and I'm here to object today. If we accept this recommendation from the K-12 chair, we will have spent more time in this committee discussing the reallocation of $22,983 with regards to Senate Bill 42, the claims bill. And I just think that this is worthy of going through the appropriation process like every other budget that has a subcommittee. We heard earlier this year the complaints of a lot of committee members about the ARPA funds not coming through this committee, and I don't believe that dollar amount approached the $6.7 billion. So I would urge this committee to reject this recommendation and have this go through the process as designed.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I think the objections to the ARPA funds were that it was actually going to the executive branch or a Spark executive committee to make those determinations rather than the legislature. By focusing and having this budget go to K-12, it is still in the hands and the purview of the legislature. In fact, it gets more attention in our committee than it would in the amount of time that we would spend in a day or an hour or minutes in this committee. And since you serve on that committee, you have plenty of opportunity to dive deep into it. As for the reasons, I think it's beneficial to take a moment and think about the reasons. In 2010, the Kansas legislature had a lawsuit, and it was premised on the fact that kids aren't succeeding in school, and therefore we need more funding. In fact, in Gannon 5 in 2017, the Supreme Court opined about failing 25% of our kids. It's exactly the language they said. We are failing. And they also said that the kids that are at most at need, we're especially failing those kids. So to remind the committee where we are today, that was in 2017, in which 25% of our kids were in the lowest level. And by the way, what the standard or the metric the Supreme Court used was the state assessment. Today, the same state assessment that existed or began in 2015 is used today, and it was 25% of our kids in the lowest level. Well, let me share with you what that is today. Today, in English language arts, that's 34% in the very lowest level. And of the free and reduced lunch, the very ones that they said that are the most difficult to educate, that's how the Supreme Court referred to this group, those that are facing poverty, there are 48% of our students in the lowest level. So we're doing worse. And in math, it's the same thing. We have 48% of our free and reduced students in the lowest level. So this comes back to my point of why would we take the funding, the $6 billion, and we would put it in K-12. The reason is so that we can include accountability, transparency policy. And that has been effective because it's important for us, if we're going to increase funding, and I just stated that in 2 years we're increasing by 600 million SGF, then we should be getting back some results. Right now, the needle is moving in the opposite direction for outcomes. And I don't think that should be okay with anyone in here. And if we were to place it into this budget, we could add provisos, but we could do little more than that. And so that is why it is moved into a separate budget, so it gets more attention and that it also may contain policy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? Representative Ousley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair. Thank you. Lo siento. Thank you for the briefing on the Gannon decision. And I think what you just stated was that the purpose of removing this from the budget committee, known as appropriations, is to bundle appropriations and policy. And if that's the standard that you want to keep, then I guess you go ahead and support the recommendation of the chair of K-12. But otherwise, I think that a budget this large should be taken under consideration of this committee. I do serve on K-12. I do have the copy here. I've got the Department of Education, recommendations and requests. We've spent a day or two at most. The committee couldn't even decide on that yesterday. I would argue that we just spent more time on this committee on the DCF budget, which is, 1/6 of the budget that's here in the KSDE. We've got 258 FTEs in this budget. There are roughly 35,000 licensed teachers in the state of Kansas, roughly 470,000 students in the state of Kansas. I think this budget and those folks deserve the attention of this committee. So again, I'd urge that you reject this, and I'm not quite sure what a lawsuit that's been settled that our chair just explained to us, that we're keeping our commitment to that lawsuit by increasing the funding accordingly with the CPI adjustment. I'd urge the committee to reject this recommendation.
Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's somewhat disingenuous to say that the K-12 Budget Committee has only had about 2 days to talk about this, when in reality if you take into account all of the testimony and all of the people that we have heard from and listened to, there would not be time in this committee to do that whatsoever. This process has been in place since 2017 when we started working on a new formula. There wasn't a lot of complaints about it back then, and all of a sudden now it's a big complaint today. I don't understand that. But to sit here and tell us that this chair, Representative Williams, has not given ample time and clear discussion in that committee is disingenuous, because she has. You do not see people standing before us and giving tons of testimony on each one of these budgets. those are done in the subcommittees. Many times, that K to 12 does not end at 5 o'clock because we are making sure that we give ample time. So I just think that's a path that we shouldn't go down. I think it's a policy that's now been in place for 6 years. It hasn't been an objection until recently. It's also interesting, Mr. Chairman, when I hear legislators say, well, yeah, our kids are failing, but our excuses are we didn't have funding for years. Oh, wait a minute. No, now it was COVID. But we know they're failing, but we're just going to keep doing what? They're not offering constructive solutions to what we're going to do for these kids. It was appalling for me the other day as I was visiting with one of our agency that does licensing and certifications for some professionals, and I was looking at reducing perhaps some of the hours that they were needing. And in the course of my discussion, this individual says, Representative, I would ask you not to do that because we are having to teach these individuals how to read and do basic math. It is like I had just never thought about what might be happening in some of these courses to get our professionals registered, certified, or licensed. And then I sat down with the Board of Regents, the number of remedial classes. So we have either the state is paying twice for these classes or the taxpayers are paying twice out of their own pockets. Reading and math, it is very, very difficult to get through a daily life and not be able to read or do math. And I'm talking basic. I'm not talking algebra. I'm talking basic math. And we can say that we're going to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, but how many generations are going to go by that cannot read and do math at grade level? There's a lot of talk and excitement of an 86% graduation rate, but we are graduating kids that cannot read and do math. So am I passionate about this? I am, because it is just totally disingenuous to say that this chair has not allowed more discussion than we ever would have seen or would have had, or that we have ever had. I have had the opportunity to be on the Appropriations Committee for over 10 years. And not one time was K-12 budget ever dissected like we do currently for the last 6 years in the K-12 budget, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, being new to the committee, looking at the SGF governor's recommendation for 24 versus 25, there's a significant difference. I didn't know if that was a matter of I just don't know what that difference is about, if the chair could comment on that.
I would presume it's in settling with the Gannon case and the statutory increase, but I'll turn that over to Chairperson Williams.
Yes, it does include the CPI increases, but it also is caseloads. So we're losing students. There's 458,000 students I think we've lost in the last post-COVID, where it kind of corrected 13,000 students. And so when you lose students, think about the average student's worth about $20,000. Now, some of that, 60 to 70% is state aid. So that is another reason. And the consensus revenue estimates also, that's what creates the fluctuations. And in addition to what the chair said, the CPIU increase for 2024.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just appreciate the clarification. Madam, I was referring to Chair Williams.
Any further discussion? Representative Ousley.
Thank you. And I think that just demonstrates why this committee should have a closer look at this budget, and just a motion to recommend that this committee stay hands off on this. We already have questions about the budget. I have not only raised my complaints today. If you all recall, I got to substitute on this committee last year. I raised my objections then. I want to say that the K-12 budget was run through the Appropriations Committee in 19 or 20, and maybe staff can clarify that for me. So to say that this has been the precedent, I think is also somewhat disingenuous. I have never said that our kids are failing. I'm always here to work with anybody that'll work with. And I think that also stresses the importance of having more eyes upon this as it impacts every student in the state of Kansas and every teacher in the state of Kansas, let alone, our department. I never said that the chair did not allow discussion. I asked the committee yesterday how long we had spent reviewing this, and it was a day. We heard a presentation, as you would in a committee, and I don't recall anybody else testifying on it other than the department. And I could be wrong on that, but we've not had multiple days of hearings and multiple conferees here. Yesterday in committee, I learned a new acronym that I'd never heard of before because we worked a bill that I think could have belonged in the health committee. So we've had time, and I think the whole point is not that the K-12 budget is not doing their job. I think it's that this committee deserves the opportunity to do its job. So I stand by my urging.
Just for historical perspective, the only time as far as my tenure as House Appropriations Chair that we did not have the budget of K through 12 education be addressed by the Budget Committee was in 2020 when we had COVID. And this was about the same time of year because it was the Big 12 tournament when things started to escalate in regards to COVID-19. And if you remember, we adjourned probably in the third week of March and we never came back. And so we passed a bare bones budget, and it was included in there. But all the other years, it has been addressed by the K through 12 Education Budget Committee. Representative Helgerson.
First, if you are going to challenge public education, you are going to rile many of us who believe strongly in public education. So while there are problems with public education, I would urge us not to get into a long and protracted debate about the failings or the successes of public education right now. We are discussing whether or not to separate the bills and the budget. And just for historical purposes, because I go back to '83, we have done it both ways. At times we have done it, and it really sits according to what the purposes of the speaker and the chairman have been, and even before there was a chairman of education, because they didn't deal with the budget. There are some fundamental questions, though, about this, and that are whether or not we're going to try to change how funding is made in the long term. The Education Committee, and I sat in the other day, has had numerous discussions. Some of the points they made I agree with, and some of them I don't. I'm assuming that there will be ample opportunity to have a vigorous debate on the House floor about all of these issues. And if the chairman of the committee believes that we are separating it and the speaker believes that, so be it. That's part of their call. And believe me, I don't like the idea historically of having all of the budgets together. I actually prefer when we used to have K through 12 in one, higher ed in another, state hospitals in another, social services in another, because that's how we used to do it. But there's also a fundamental issue here, and that is, do we start cutting to the bottom line? Do we start putting public dollars to private schools? And that's the issue that we're going to have to address. We're not going to solve it here, and we have different ideas about how the money is going to be allocated and from what pot of money. And the majority party wants to move into a separate bill, and we'll fight all of these issues out on the floor. And, let's understand that that's just the way the ball game is right now.
Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions, but I'm sorry I followed the secretary out. I had a question for her, and I missed the motion. If I could
There is
have...
no motion.
Pardon me?
There is no motion.
There is no motion at this
No.
time? Okay. Then what I'm wondering is, and so I don't know if we're on policy or money or what or where this comes, but I've got 3 grandkids in Omaha, and a few years ago, well, maybe about 7, the city, and I believe it's just citywide, went to magnet schools for high school. And I don't know how the decision was made. I have checked with some folks in the education field to kind of look into that for me. But the kids were applied to separate, they applied to go to a magnet school, public school, and based on their interest in curriculum and grades, they were selected to go to this school or that school, and the city bit off a big chunk to do that. My grandkids have thrived in that. One went to a STEM school, and others the boys went to something else. I don't know what exactly, but they have thrived with it, and they've made good grades. They've made good social choices, and it's just been it was shocking to me to hear this. My point is, if we're not happy with the way our schools are doing, and I'm happy with our school, although we have more kids failing than I'd like, why don't we fix it rather than just kind of throwing it out and working towards private education? A lot of communities can't have private education. We have private schools. I've used private schools, but that's the big question in this room right now, and I just didn't know what we were actually discussing. I don't understand why don't we get creative and find some ways to do a better job with the money we have now. And I'm not going to accept that the 10 years of inadequate funding didn't affect the scores that we're having right now. I know that those kids missed out on basic principles in lower grades, and they are not as well equipped as they should be, and it was 10 years. So I think that we need to realize that the funding is going to we've got to catch up. These kids' test scores are not the only measure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The budget report is just on the money that is funding K through 12 education. This has nothing to do in the budget committee report, anything to do with policy. That is going to be addressed by the K through 12 education budget committee. Any further discussion in regards to the budget report out? Seeing none, Representative Williams.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do have a commitment to public school. It's over $9 billion if you count all funding sources. And so that remains consistent. Mr. Chair, my motion is to move the K-12 Budget Committee's recommendation to take the fiscal year 23, 24, and 25 as provided in Section 24 of House Bill 2274 and Sections 57 and 58 of House Bill 2273 and Sections 118 of House Bill 2273 and amending that and placing that into the K-12 Education Budget Committee.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Landwehr. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. All right. Thank you, Chairperson Williams. That actually concludes the budget report outs we have today. But Vice Chairman Hoffman has a request.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to let the Appropriations Committee know that General Government Budget will be touring the state printers on Tuesday at 3:30. If you would like to go, it's not an official meeting, but if you would like to go, please let my assistant know, and so that we make sure that they know how many people are coming. And we're planning on meeting at the MAP at about 3:15 Tuesday to carpool. But if you want to meet us, that's over there. That's fine. So 2:15. We'll be heading over to the state printers to tour their building on Tuesday. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 3:15, I'm sorry. Yeah, 3:15 Tuesday.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chairman. Okay, so committee, We are not going to have a meeting tomorrow, obviously. We're not going to, I know everybody is upset about that. Or on Monday. So on Tuesday, we're going to have our final budget report out, and then we'll be done with all of the budget committee reports. So until Tuesday morning, we will be adjourned, but I believe Representative Carlin had a phone malfunction earlier. All right, so she's going to be providing us with our first breakfast from a committee member Tuesday morning. So until Tuesday at 9 a.m., we are adjourned.